Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we are continuing on in a multi-week series looking at different gait deviations or walking problems with solutions on how to correct these gait deviations to improve your walking efficiency, confidence, and safety. And in today's video, we are going over knee buckling. So in this video, you're going to learn what some of the most common causes are of knee buckling after a neurologic injury, and of course, solutions on how to decrease that knee buckling so that you can feel safer and more confident when you are walking. If you're new to this channel, I'm Tara. I'm a neurologic physical therapist, and on this channel we talk about anything and everything related to mobility, health, fitness, and mindset with the end goal of empowering you with as many tools as possible to take full ownership of your neuro rehab and your overall health. But before we dive into today's video, if you are someone who is in the process of neurologic recovery and you feel overwhelmed or you feel like you've just plateaued in your progress, most likely that is because going to physical therapy just once or twice a week just really isn't enough. Neurologic recovery really needs to be a daily process, meaning that you're doing exercises consistently every single day. And that is why I have designed our membership program. With our membership program, as a gold member, you get access to an entire vault of home exercises that I actually pull from to create exercise programs for the patients that I see in person. All the exercises are in a software system so you can easily filter through based on the movement problem that you're trying to correct or the task that you're trying to restore, meaning what types of functional activities you're trying to get back to doing. In addition to that, as a gold member, you get access to our monthly Ask Me Anythings where you can get your specific questions answered, and our monthly webinars where we cover a variety of topics, all intended to give you that just little extra 1% edge to enhance your overall functional recovery. To learn more about our programs, to sign up, or to schedule a discovery call where you can talk to someone in person to see if our program is right for you, you can visit rehab-hq.com. But now back to knee buckling. So, like the word describes and what most of you describe it to me when you come in and I see you in person, is literally you just feel like your legs are kind of going to give out on you, either one leg or both legs, and we'll go into why that might be the case, even if you have hemiparesis, why you might feel knee buckling in both legs. But in any case, you just feel like that leg collapses out from underneath you. That's what I'm calling knee buckling. Now, after a neurologic injury, why might this happen? Well, the most common reason is that you're just weak. You have weakness either in your quadricep muscles, those are the muscles that straighten the knee out, or, and this one often gets missed, you have weakness in your plantar flexors. So we have muscles back here that point our foot, but when our foot's on the ground, our plantar flexors actually act to prevent our shin bones from translating forward, right? So if we have a muscle back here, kind of pulls those shin bones backwards. This is not necessarily that common after a stroke, but it is very, very common with something like peripheral neuropathy. So if you have diabetes, and this actually did happen recently, I was seeing someone who was having a walking problem that they thought was all related to a stroke, and come to find out it was actually the reason his legs were buckling was because of peripheral neuropathy. Everyone was so focused on his stroke that they didn't notice that he was getting this weakness in both legs. In other words, he was getting this buckling in both legs. So just something to keep in mind. There's many times if you're a therapist, you just have to like zoom out and look at the whole picture to see if maybe there's something else going on. But knee buckling because of weakness in your plantar flexors is something that I see more often in someone who has a peripheral neuropathy, but just be aware it can occur. And so some of the exercises we go over today are going to be to strengthen those plantar flexors. And then along the same lines of weakness or poor muscle performance is the inability to do eccentric control of your quadriceps. If you've been following along in this series, I have talked about this in previous videos. If this is the first video you're seeing, the entire series All the videos will be linked in the description below. I highly recommend that you go back and watch some of those because there's going to be exercises that I'm not going to repeat in this video. So good to watch all of the videos in order so that you can kind of get the full picture and you can get all the exercises and a more detailed explanations of some of these concepts that I've covered in previous videos. But long story short, eccentric control is the ability of the quadricep muscles to maintain a contraction while it's lengthening. Okay, so concentric contraction is the muscle shortens as it's contracting. Eccentric means that you have to have tension in that muscle as it's lengthening. Okay, if you lose that ability of that eccentric control, for some of you, if your knees are locked out, as soon as they unlock, you're just going to crumple like an accordion because you don't have that eccentric control. Very, very important. Also, for those of you that maybe you notice this knee buckling when you're going downstairs, stepping down with a stronger leg leading the way requires a ton of eccentric control. So we are going to go over exercises today specifically for that. And those are the ones that you're going to want to pay attention to, especially if you notice it when you're going downstairs, more so than when you're walking. And then the other one is the inability to dissociate. Now I'm going to breeze through this a little bit. So again, if this is the first video you're seeing in this series, go back and watch the previous video where I've talked extensively on dissociation. But briefly, dissociation is the ability to get your legs to do opposite things at the same time. After a stroke or damage to one hemisphere of the brain, sometimes you lose this ability and both legs want to do the same thing at the same time. So either they both want to flex at the same time or they're both going to want to stay straight at the same time. So that means when you do one motion with one leg, the other leg's going to want to do the same thing. Okay, so if you cannot dissociate, meaning legs do opposite things at the same time, you might feel that leg bend when you bring one leg up. Now, remember I mentioned at the beginning that you can have knee buckling even in your strong leg. And it would be due to this inability to dissociate. So let's say you're standing on your strong leg and you go to swing your weaker leg through. If you cannot dissociate, your strong leg is going to want to bend. And so that's why some of you might feel like your stronger leg also buckles. That would be an inability for your legs to do opposite things at the same time, at the same time doing opposite directions. And we're going to go through some exercises specifically for that today so that you won't feel that. Hopefully it'll decrease that sensation that your knees are buckling. So in that case, it's not weakness in your strong leg. It's just not being able to dissociate, okay? Very, very important. And then the other one is a flexor synergy. So this is not as common. I think all the videos that we've talked about, all the movement problems we've talked about up until this point have all talked about extensor synergy because that is the most common. But an abnormal synergy pattern, just a brief review, is some believe after damage to your brain, you go through these stages of recovery similar to how infants develop. And if you notice infants at the very beginning before their brains start to develop, they're either all flexion or all extension. These patterns are kind of ingrained or hardwired. We're born with these hardwired patterns. And some believe that these patterns emerge after a brain injury. And in this case, it would be a flexor synergy pattern. Now, how do you know this is you? If at night when you're in bed and you're laying down, your legs just involuntarily flex up, that would be a sign that you have this flexor synergy pattern. And in some cases, kind of a cousin to a flexor synergy pattern that I have observed in some people is a flexor withdrawal. So if you've ever noticed a baby that if you kind of scratch their foot, their legs kind of withdraw up. In some cases, it's not super common, but I've worked with some people where it's actually that kind of similar reaction to sensation on the bottom of the foot. So I'm not going to give any exercises for that today, but just something to be aware of. And you can test it. Just have someone scratch the bottom of your foot, or, create, a little bit of a painful stimulus to the bottom of your foot. And if your legs draw up, that could be the reason that your knees are buckling when you're walking. And my suggestion for that is like desensitization, like get different sensations on the bottom of your foot to desensitize the bottom of your foot to that painful stimulus. The other thing that sometimes works that I've used with patients is a vibration plate. Again, you're just trying to get different sensations on the bottom of your foot to desensitize your body from feeling like it needs to do that withdrawal, okay? Not super common, but I have seen cases of that, so just something to be aware of. And then the last one that I haven't mentioned, but I'm sure you guys were just waiting for me to bring it up, is spasticity. What is spasticity? Spasticity is an involuntary contraction that is the result of damage to your brain or your spinal cord. As I've mentioned in many other videos in this series, dystonia and spasticity are not the same thing. If you've been diagnosed with dystonia, 99% of the videos on this channel are going to make your dystonia worse. And this is very, very important. Not that I want to discourage anyone from watching videos on this channel, but again, if you've been diagnosed with dystonia, most of the videos on this channel are going to make the dystonia worse. So dystonia, spasticity, they are not the same thing. But if you have spasticity in your hamstring muscles, it's an involuntary contraction, and sometimes that can cause your knees to buckle when you're walking. So now, based on all of that, what do you do about it? First, we're going to talk about tools or braces or things that you can do to help facilitate knee extension. Then we're going to go into strengthening both eccentric and concentric control of the quads and the plantar flexors. And we'll end this video with some gait drills or walking drills you can start doing today to get those repetitions in, to get better coordination of the muscles that keep that knee straight, to improve your overall walking confidence and safety. But now let's go ahead and dive into the solutions. All right, so this is the first time I'm going to talk about this brace where it actually has a benefit. This is a floor reaction AFO. I've talked about this in a couple previous videos about how it's not a great brace after a stroke. And I will say it again, it is a good brace for one specific purpose. And that is this shell right here on the front pushes the shin bone backwards. It's absolutely fabulous as kind of a thought process that we go through as therapists when we're making decisions. If we can correct a knee problem at the ankle, that's always ideal versus trying to put some sort of a brace over the knee. The reason being is that they're just very hard to wear, anything around the knee. Either you have to put it over pants or under pants, like underneath your pants. If you put it over your pants, you got to take it off. If you're a female, every time you go to the bathroom. There's just a lot of downsides to trying to improve a walking pattern with something that goes over the knee. So if we can correct it at the ankle, that is always preferred. So that goes for both knee hyperextension, where we would want something around the ankle that pushes the shin bone forward. But with knee buckling, we put a brace like this on your lower leg, and this pushes the shin bone backwards, okay? So it helps to keep that knee straight in standing. So when your foot hits the ground, as you move your body weight forward, because that is fixed at a 90-degree angle, it'll automatically push your shin bone backwards. Now, The downside of this brace, and where I've talked about it in previous videos, is that a therapist will choose this brace very, very early on, like sometimes before you even leave the hospital. And it is extremely common for someone to develop spasticity. And this brace never gets changed, specifically in the muscles that point the foot down. So if you're starting to get some involuntary contractions or you feel some twitching in your calf, that's when you would want to go back to your physical therapist and get out of a brace like this. My preferred method of bracing in the early stages is not to really come up with anything permanent yet, or to come up with a brace with the orthotist where you can do both, right? So a custom brace, this is what we call it's custom, but it's more off the shelf. They can make custom braces that in the early stages can push your shin bone back, but then if you start to develop spasticity, it can push your shin bone forward. But that's just something you would talk to an orthotist about. So this has one specific purpose and one specific purpose only, and that is for those of you that buckle, okay? It also is effective for those of you that have that flexor synergy or that flexor withdrawal. I've used it in those cases before as well, and it can be effective for that as well. So someone that buckles, the first solution would be to try and find something at the ankle to push that shin bone backwards, okay? Floor reaction, AFO. Key important thing is you've got this shell on the front. Very, very effective for those of you that have peripheral neuropathy, where you don't usually, actually, you don't get any kind of spasticity with just a true peripheral neuropathy with no other underlying neurologic conditions. Great, great, great brace. And now let's go to something at the knee. Now, anything you go to at the knee, I consider like training tools. And the reason being, what I've already mentioned, is that you can't, it's just very hard for it to be functional to put something around your knee as far as like what you're gonna wear on the bottom half of your body. And plus, it's just not functional because we do need to be able to bend our knee during certain points of the walking cycle. But I love, love, love a knee immobilizer as a training tool. Okay, so this will keep your knee straight, very, very cheap. I will put a link in the description below. You can buy them on Amazon. Absolutely essential if you're someone that buckles to work on stance control. So if you're working on, if you have weakness in the quadricep muscles or the muscles that keep the knee straight, put the knee immobilizer on to start, and you can work on weight shifting. A knee immobilizer is also great if you have spasticity in the hamstrings, because this will inhibit that. Also great if you can't dissociate in the early stages. Whatever leg is on the ground, that's the leg that you want to put the knee immobilizer on. Again, it's a training tool working on single leg standing balance with making sure to keep that leg, helping to keep that leg straight while you do other things with the other leg. And we're going to go through some exercises today. Any of the exercises that we go through today, if you absolutely can't keep your knee straight, the leg that you're loading or that you're standing on, I highly recommend you invest in a knee immobilizer. Now, you want it to be very snug and you want it as long as possible. So I think they come up to like 24 inches. The length is really, really important because the shorter it is, the more likely your knee is just gonna like kind of bend around the brace. So I buy the longest one, and then of course that means it's bigger around this way. And then I find something to just make these straps tighter. A lot of times I just wrap the blue straps around it. The longer, the better. So you can always make something more snug by just wrapping a bunch of straps around it, but that length is super important. So get the longest one on Amazon that you can find. But knee immobilizer, great, great, great training tool. All right, now let's talk about strengthening. We're gonna start with the plantar flexors. Remember, I said that's part of the reason why those tibias, those shin bones might translate forward. So you're just gonna go up on your toes and down. We wanna strengthen this muscle back here, okay? If you can't go up single leg, what you're gonna do is you're gonna go up with both legs and then try and pick this leg up and just try and not drop fast. You're gonna try and slow it down, okay? So go up on both toes and then pick one foot up and just try not to drop really fast. That's one method. The other method is, if you're really weak and you can't support your body weight, is to pitch forward a little bit, and that makes it a little bit easier. One thing you want to focus on when you're doing those heel raises is that you're not letting your knees bend. Okay, that's what I see quite frequently with people that have this weakness that's causing the knee buckling. Make sure your knees are staying straight, and then as you get better, you can start walking your feet in. That's putting more body weight directly over your feet, so that makes it a little bit harder. Okay, so initially, feet behind you makes it a little bit easier. Feet directly under you makes it a little bit harder, okay? Especially if you can't do it single leg. This way is gonna make it easier. Walk your feet in. This way will make it a little bit harder. Now we're gonna work that concentric control of those quadricep muscles. Loading this leg, this is the working leg. I'm putting the other leg up on kind of a block so we can bias this leg. You don't want any pressure on this other foot, and sometimes setting it up on something will discourage you from pushing with this leg. And then you're gonna shift, try and center your weight over the working leg, lean forward and push. And then down slow. On the way up, you're working concentric. On the way down, you're working eccentric. Start with a higher stool and then work your way down to a regular height chair. This is a counter height. I think the counter height stool is the shorter one of the two stools. I think bar height is the taller one. This is the shorter one of the two types of stools that you can find on Amazon. And again, concentric, eccentric, concentric, eccentric, working that concentric and eccentric control of those quadriceps. But sit to stand isn't really the same position that you're in when you're walking. So once you can do like a sit to stand pretty well, you really want to be able to move on to a step up. Okay, so the sit to stand that we just did, that's kind of like step one. But again, you're not in this position when you're walking like we just did in the sit to stand. You're straight up and down. Okay, so you really need to train specifically. So once you get really good at that, your next step would be to come to a step up. Okay, that's concentric, eccentric, concentric, eccentric. Now, in a previous video, I talked about this PVC frame. Love it, love it, love it. You can make one of these pretty cheap, and they're a great tool to work on a lot of what we call pre-gait drills, okay? Concentric, eccentric. And then once you get really good at that, and this is really more for those of you that are working on that eccentric control for stairs, you really want to be able to go concentric up and eccentric off the front of the stool. Especially those of you that you're buckling, you do good on like regular walking, but when you're trying to go downstairs, concentric. And then when you try and step down, you feel like that leg just kind of buckles on you or gives out. This would be the exercise that you'd want to work on. Concentric and then eccentric off the front. Okay, very, very, very beneficial drill. Now we're getting into a little bit more of an advanced drill, specifically for those of you that cannot dissociate. Okay, so you might have to listen to this section twice, but if you're someone that can't dissociate, this is your weak leg. This is how I recommend you start. This is your involved leg. Okay, so we're switching it up. We're doing a sit to stand. This is your involved leg. Okay, and what you want to do is reach over and make sure you do this with help the first time. Okay, and you're doing a sit to stand on your stronger leg. Now remember, this is specifically for those of you that feel like your stronger leg buckles. Okay, we're dissociating. We need to get this leg very high into flexion. Okay, and then you're gonna do that sit to stand with this leg. Do you see how far apart my legs are, like how flexed up this one is compared to how straight down this one is? You really want these on the extremes, okay? Because that's where some of you are getting into trouble because you can't dissociate. So it's your stronger leg, help your weaker leg up, or your involved leg up onto the step, reach across, use your hands to help you sit to stand, okay? Once you can do that, then try and go opposite, where now your weaker leg is down, your stronger leg is up. Remember, we want a lot of distance. We want them dissociated, completely opposite, and you're going to do that sit to stand on your other leg. Okay? Concentric, eccentric. Concentric, eccentric. Now, if you can't do this, like you just can't get any push with that leg, that's when I would put the knee immobilizer on, okay? And then you would just start in standing, okay? So you put the knee immobilizer on, then you just start standing, reach over, you got the knee immobilizer on, and you're gonna try and step that your uninvolved leg up, okay? Or you could do this really with either leg. It's just gonna be a lot harder for some of you to get your weaker leg up here. Okay, so knee immobilizer on the leg you're standing on. And you want to get this leg really out of the way. Those are for those of you that can't dissociate your right from your left. And then that is it for this video. This is just a couple of exercises within each one of these kind of categories of root cause problems. But as I mentioned at the beginning, we do have our membership program, and as part of that membership program, you get access to an entire vault of exercises where you can actually filter down by some of these specific problems. For example, you can filter to out of synergy exercises for the leg or the arm. You can filter by gait drills, and you can get very specific on taking your specific movement problem, putting it into the software system, and it'll give you the specific exercises for that specific root cause problem. And then what we do during our monthly meetings where we get together is we go through some of your specific problems and we work through the library together, really teaching you how to be able to take full ownership of your recovery, which is absolutely essential to achieving your specific goals. So again, to learn more about our program, to sign up, or to schedule a discovery call where you can talk to someone in person to see if our program is right for you, you can visit rehab-hq.com. I enjoyed spending time with you all today, and I'll see you in the next video. Have a good day.